Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to our next video lesson. We're going to be talking about this application, which involves using some group boxes, and we're going to use the radio buttons and also some check boxes. And the idea is this. We have a label down here that has the statement, Mary had a little lamb. Alright, what we're going to be able to do with these different controls is to change the font color, change the background color, change the alignment, and then also we're going to be able to change the format. We can select one, two, or all of these, and the format should change. Here's another thing to also consider. What if the user decides I want a red background and a red font, as you see in this particular scenario? Well, if that occurs, then a red background and a red font means that you're not going to be able to see the text. So what I'd like is to see a message box that will appear, something like this, that will basically display art error, right? They've committed an artistic error that says red background and foreground means you can't see this text. So then the user clicks OK, and then they can select a different color in order to be able to see the text. And then of course you have your user requirements and also some of the software requirements. And what I'm insisting that you use is the logical AND operator to accomplish the task when it comes to establishing the font. How should I say this? The font format, right? So if you want bold and italic, or if you want bold and underline, or italic and underline only, or all three of these, you're going to have to use the AND operator. And I'll talk about how that's going to work out. Alright, so I can let you read the user requirements and the software requirements later. Let's get programming and design the graphical user interface. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Visual Studio 2008 and create a Visual Basic program. Windows Form application. We're going to call this VB Lab 14 project, and I'm going to click OK. Alright, so here's our form. Let me go ahead and open up the toolbox, and I want to tack the auto hide button down so that I can drag and drop some of the different controls to the form. So I'll click the auto hide button, and let me switch over here to the PDF document. So it looks like I have a group box over here. Let me show you what that's all about. So if I were to scroll down, and here we go, group box. So you'll notice that the group box is probably going to be under the containers area. So let me just go ahead and drag a group box to the form, and I can move this to the upper left hand corner of the form by moving my mouse pointer on top of this move button. So I'll move it to the upper left hand corner like that. And then let me go back to the handout, and you'll notice that it says font color is the text property. So it's already selected, so I can open up the properties panel. And then for the text property, we'll say font color is the text that we want to type there. Okay, so font color. And then we have three radio buttons. Notice that the radio buttons are inside of the group box. So red, green, and blue. What I'm going to do is open this up just a little bit, and I'm going to drag and drop three radio buttons. Now the radio buttons are underneath the common controls area. Here's one radio button. Let me drag and drop that inside of the group box. And then after I've moved it inside the group box, let me take this and then move it to the upper left hand corner of the group box so it looks something like this. Then I can take this radio button, Control C, Control V for copy and paste. Then I can basically copy and paste another one of these and move it together something like this. Alright, let me go back to the handout. It looks like there's a little bit of space in between here, so maybe I should do something like this. I want to make sure that the spacing is all equal, so let me select the first one. Let me actually do this. Let me select the first one, the second one, and the third one. And I want to make sure that the vertical spacing is identical, so I think that's this guy. Let's see. Increase, decrease, no, make vertical spacing equal. This is it. So let me click here, and now all the vertical spacing will be equal. I can now readjust the group box so that it contains all those, so something like this. I'll still have to probably make an adjustment because all these need to have a specific text property. Specifically, that should say red. So for this text property, that's going to be red. The next one's going to be green. The last one's going to be blue. Okay, so this will be green. And this last one will be blue. Another thing that you're going to notice is that the red text has a red font color, the green text has a green font color, the blue text has a blue font color as well. So let's go ahead and change those, and the way I'm going to do that is I'll select the red radio button first. I'm going to go to the for color, and I'm going to change that for color. After I click the custom tab, I'll click the red paint chip. And let me switch back to the handout. Yeah, okay, I thought it was maybe bolded, but it doesn't look like it's bold. That looks bolded, obviously, so it's just simply red. Then I can change this one to green. So again, the for color property is what you're looking for. I'll click the custom tab, and I'll select green, and then blue. So once again, the for color property, select the custom tab, and then we'll select the blue paint chip, which is this guy right here. All right, so it looks like we're finished. Let me hide the toolbox. I don't need that right now. We are finished with these. Now we have to name the different properties. So for example, this one right here, the Hungarian notation for a radio button will be the letters RDB. Okay. So in this case, we're going to have RDB and then whatever this is. Well, in this case, it's going to be the font color. All right, so I'm going to type RDB in the name property area here for this particular radio button. So we're going to say RDB, and let's call this red font. And then this one's going to be RDB green font. And this last radio button will be RDB blue font. Okay. Well, now that I have my group box, let me go ahead and open up my form a little bit. I need a little bit more space, obviously. In fact, I need to change that from Form 1 to User Format. So let's go ahead and change the text property to User Format. Enter. Okay. Now, according to the handout, it looks like I have a background color group box with also radio buttons inside there that are labeled red, green, and blue. Well, one easy way to do this is to just simply select this group box, Control-C, Control-V as in Victor, that is copy and paste, and then I'm going to go ahead and move this into position right next to the font color group box, and I'll rename this thing. Now the name of this particular group box is supposed to be background color, so let me rename this to background color. Okay, so there's background color. And let me resize this so that, well, let me go back to the handout. It looks like it's going to get really close to that letter R in terms of the width of this thing. So, well, that's too much. Probably about right there. Okay, so what's the size of this thing? The width of this thing is 107 pixels. So let me move this over, and I'm going to make this font color 107 pixels as well. So I'll just type in for the width property 107, press enter. Now I can go ahead and take this back color group box and move it close to here, and I know that they're identical in size. Now, of course, the names have to be considered because this one over here says radio button 3. Well, we're going to rename that RDB red back, right, for background color. This one over here was RDB red font. This will be RDB red background. This will be RDB green back. And RDB blue back for this last radio button. Okay, so that finishes these two group boxes. Let's go back to the handout, and now I have an alignment area here. So let me go ahead and create. Actually, you know, I can just take this one. That's fine. I can just copy and paste it. I'm going to move it over here like that. I have to change the name property, obviously, to the word alignment. So the text property for this group box is going to be alignment. And this is not going to be a red font, obviously. That's going to be a different font color, namely black. So I'm going to go to the for color property. And what I'll do is I'll select the custom tab and then just select the black paint chip. I'm going to do that for all of these as well. Let's see here, so custom, and then black, and then for this last radio button, custom, and black. And the words need to be left, center, right. Okay, so left, property, that's left. This one's going to be center. And then this text property is going to be right. Okay, so I'm going to name these different properties now that I've changed the text property. So I'll go back over here to the name property at the top. For this radial button, it's going to be RDB left. This will be RDB center. And this last one will be RDB right. So let me select this, go back over here, RDB right. Okay, that takes care of the alignment group. And then finally we have a bunch of checkboxes that we have to create, namely bold, underline, and italics. And we have that in the format group box. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this group. I'm going to copy the alignment group. So first let me select it. And let me copy and paste by simply hitting Control-C, Control-V as in Victor. And I'm going to move this into position. Alright, so now I can take this group box, move it into position so that it looks something like this. This is supposed to be a checkbox. So let me remove these first. So I'll select this and then delete it, delete this one, delete this one, and then from the toolbox let me drag and drop a checkbox into the format. Here we go, into the format group box, so something like this. And then I can take this guy, copy and paste it, and then I'm going to move and align it so that it looks something like this. And then one more paste about right here. Okay, so this is supposed to be bold, so I'll change the text property to bold. This text property will be italic, or underline I should say. I think that's right. Let me go back over here. Yep, underline, and then italics for the last one. Okay, now we want this text to be bold, so what I'm going to do is select it, go to the font property, and in the font property, the bold attribute, I'm going to set that to true. So let me double click here. Now that's bold. For this checkbox, I want that to be underlined. So over here where it says underline for the font property, I'm going to double click this to turn that to true. I could have also hit the drop down box and then selected true. It's the same thing. And then for this text, or checkbox I should say, we want that to be italic. So to make that italicized, for the font property, italic, double click, turn that to true. Okay, so it looks like my form is complete. Let me go ahead and reduce the size of this so that it's symmetrical on the left and the right hand side. Looks like I have a horizontal line now that spans across the entire form. So that just simply means bringing in a label, and we're going to change the auto size feature to false so that I can span across the entire form. And we're going to make the back color black. I'm going to reduce the height of this. I'm not going to be able to reduce it all the way, so I need to go to the size property, open that up, and then for the height, I'm going to type in the number 1, and there's my horizontal line. So let me select it again. I'm going to use the arrows to move that up a little bit so it looks something like this. Okay, so I'll switch back to the handout, and it looks like I have an outer label and I have an inner label. So it looks like a box, right? But that's really a label. Here, I'll show you. So let me go ahead and drag and drop another label to the form. And the auto size feature will set to false. Let me go ahead and resize this thing. So it looks something like this, say for example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the border style. The border style for this particular one will be fixed single. So it looks like a big box, as you can see here. We don't need text, so I'm going to go to the text property, double click here, delete that text, and now we have the box as you see in the handout. Now within it we have another label. So what I'm going to need to do is I'll just resize it to something like this. Now let me go ahead and drag and drop another label. I'll drag it inside of this label. Once again, we're going to have to take the auto size feature off to set that to false. And then I'm going to expand or extend this all the way from here to here. In fact, let me take a look at the handout to see how far the text goes. It looks like the text doesn't actually go all the way to the edge of the form, right? It looks like it's something somewhere in the center, I should say. So let me see if I can move this so that it appears in the center of the form. I'm going to have to use the arrows on my keyboard to get some of that, to get the refined movement of the label. Let's just say something like this. Alright, now the background looks like it's red and the font is blue. So let me go ahead and change the font color, or the fore color, to blue, which would be this guy here. And the back color is going to be red. So custom, let's select red. Let me go back over here. It looks like the font is a little bit bigger, right? So let me change the font size to 12. So I'll type 12 here. That looks better. Right? It looks like it's a little bit more visible here. And I'm going to guess that that text is supposed to be middle center in terms of the alignment. So let me drag this down here to go to the text align property, and let's make this, well, I don't have to make it middle center. Actually, let's make it middle left. And this will help me to resize the label so that it still fits the text, and I also need to make it so that it's centered in the in this label that looks like a black box. So let me open this up a little bit. Move this over here. Then I'm going to use the cursor. I'm going to use the arrows on my keyboard to reposition this. That looks good. Now that's not supposed to say label 3. That's supposed to say Mary had a little lamb. So let's go down to the text property. Type Mary had a little lamb. Enter. Okay, looks good. And now let's go ahead and give this thing a name. So I'm going to call this LBL message. Enter. So this will be my LBL message label. Let's go down here and see if there's anything else I'm supposed to do. We're going to worry about this message box in just a moment here when we're talking about the program. I think graphically speaking, everything looks right. Now here's another thing I also have to consider: the initial state of these different radio buttons and also the checkboxes. The checkboxes are unchecked at first. Looks like the font color, for the font color, the blue radio button is supposed to be selected first. So let me select this blue radio button, and if I scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that the checked property is set to false. In fact, notice the clue here. It says this indicates whether the radio button is clicked or not, or checked or not. Well, we want to make that true, so let me set that to true, or I could have double clicked over here. Alright, so we set this to true. The red background radio button is supposed to be set to true as well. Right. And then in terms of the alignment, the left alignment is going to be our default alignment when we first start the application, so we'll set that checked property to true for the left line. Let's run the program just to see what it looks like. It's not going to do anything right now because we don't have any code. When I say it's not going to do anything, it's not going to change the message label because we haven't added any code to it. But it will allow me to select the different radio buttons. For example, if I select red, notice that blue is unselected. If I select green, again, notice that red is unselected. So the radio buttons work, and also the checkboxes work. We could select 1, 2, 3 of them, or none of them by unselecting them. So the form looks good. Let's go ahead and close this application. And let me reduce the size of the form just a little bit. And that looks good right there. Let me save all. Okay, so graphically speaking, looks like we're done. Let me just verify that all the names have in fact been assigned to the different controls. So I'm going to look up here, RGB red font, RGB green, blue font, that looks good. RGB red back, green back, blue back, good, good. RGB left, RGB center, RGB right, that's good. I didn't change the names of these checkboxes. So this one has the Hungarian notation CHK. And obviously that's going to be a bold checkbox. This is going to be CHK underline. And this one is going to be CHK italics. Okay, so now CHK bold, CHK underline, CHK italics, and then this label down here is LBL message. Okay, so now we really are finished. Alright, so let's do this. Let's say, for example, that if I were to click the red button, or the red radio button, right? So what I'm going to do is this. Let me double click on this, and automatically it's going to take me to the code area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize the properties window. So we'll get rid of that. Now, did you notice that when I double clicked on the red radio button, it takes me automatically to the RGB red font checked changed property. I don't want this particular property. I want the property called clicked. So you'll notice over here where it says check change, RGB red font. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this drop down box and select click. This is the procedure that I'm interested in. Let me go ahead and select these, or the property sub red RGB red font check change. Let me select this all the way to end sub, and then I can press delete on my keyboard. It is this click event that I'm interested in, because when I click this particular radio button, or this radio button, or this radio button, when I click it, that's when I want something to happen. Namely, I want it to change the font color to red. Okay, so I'm not interested in any of the other properties right now. Your textbook and also we will go into some of these other properties, but the most important thing is that we're interested in the click event. So if this happens, if we click this thing, here's what we want to do. Well, first of all, for the label message, so let me type in LBL message, there it is. Now, the property that we're interested in this case, is going to be the for color. So I type dot and then for color. Well, what do we want to set this thing equal to? Well, if I click the red font radio button, then I want the for color for this label to be red. So I'm just going to drag this thing down and look for color.red. So color.red is right here. Let me double click, and there you go. So that's the first thing that we want to happen, right? We want to change this thing to red. Now here's another thing that we also need to consider. So let me press enter, and let me go back to the handout. You'll notice that if the user had a red background, and if I selected a red font color, then I want some sort of a message box to appear indicating that an artistic error has occurred. In this particular case, a red background and foreground means that you can't see the text, and I want the user to click OK, and then that'll be it. Alright, so we need something like this in our code. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to say if LBL message dot for color dot equals. Okay, let's talk about this. If the for color equals to what? Well, in this case, if the for color is equal to the back color of that label. So what is the name of this label? It's LBL message dot back color. And let me close quotes. And then I'll press enter. So it's very important that you understand what's happening here. What I'm saying is this. I'm trying to find out if the for color and the back color, if they're the same. Well, the way that I'm going to do that is label message for color dot equals. So what I'm asking is this color the same as this color? So what the equals function allows me to do is it determines if whether or not the color for the back color of this label is the same as the color for the for color of this label, of the same label, I should say. Now, if that is true, then we want a message box to appear. So msgbox, a message box, parentheses, and in this case I want to display a message. Well, the message is going to be this, a red background and foreground means can't see the text. Close quote. Okay, so that's the message that I want to display, again, according to the handout. Now, let me press comma, and at this point, what button do we want to display? Right, so we want to give the user an opportunity to click something. Well, in this case, what is it going to be? Is it going to be an abort, retry, and ignore type of message box? Is this going to be an application modal or critical or default button, so forth and so on? So we have all of these different options over here. In this case, I'm just going to say message box style OK only. So double click here, and then parentheses, I'm sorry, not parentheses, comma rather. What is the title of this thing? Well, the title is going to be, quote, art error, close quote. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the parentheses. Press enter. All right, so this message box has this message. It's going to display only the OK button, and it's going to display art error if it notices that these two radio buttons are the same. Let's try it out. So let me go ahead and click Start Debugging. This one's already set to red. Let's see what happens now if I click this red radio button. So sure enough, here's the message box that appears. A red background and foreground means that you can't see the text. Here's the OK button, so I click OK, and we are now back. And notice that, by the way, when I change this to the red foreground color, notice that we can't see it because the red background color, the red foreground color makes it look invisible. All right, makes it look invisible. Click this. All right, so that takes care of the red. Change this back over here. That takes care of the red font click event. Now let's do the same thing for the other buttons. So let me double click green. And when I double click this again, notice it's going to take you to the check changed. You now know that you need to select the click event. So I can get rid of this one, get rid of that procedure. And what I want to do is save myself some typing, copy this, and paste it in here, because really it's the same thing. The only difference is we have to introduce the word green. So if this radio button is selected, if it's clicked, then let's change the fore color to green. So G-R-E, there it is. Now, if the label message fore color is equal to the label message back color, if that's true, then we want to say a green background and foreground means that you can't see the text, and everything else is exactly the same. So again, I'm going to go over here, double click on the blue radio button. Again, I need the clicked event, not the checked changed event. So I'll select this procedure outline and delete it. And then I'm going to copy and paste the previous code and then make some modifications. Namely, if the blue font is clicked, then I want the color to be blue for the fore color. So I'll type blue. And I don't want the message box to say green background. I want it to say blue background and foreground. It means that you can't see the text. Okay. So it looks like the radio button code has been finished for these three radio buttons. Now we need to do the same thing for the background color radio buttons. So let me double click on red. Once again, I'm going to change this to the click event. Get rid of this procedure. Hit delete a couple more times. There we go. And really it's the same thing, except there are some minor changes here. Instead of the fore color, we're not interested in changing that. We're interested in changing the background color. So let me double click this, and it's the back color that we need to change. And if I click the red back color radio button, it should say color red. So let me get rid of this and type red. There it is. Once again, if the fore color and the back color are the same, that's what this if statement is stating, or asking, I should say. If they are both the same, then we want to display a message of caution. Well, this would have to be red. If the red background and fore color are the same, then that means that you can't see the text. All right, let's now double click on the green radio button. This is going to be the same with a certain change, namely this is supposed to be the green color. This radio button is supposed to say, oops, sorry, click event. Sorry about that. And I need to do the same thing over here. That's supposed to be for the clicked event. So let me go ahead and do this. Let me get rid of this. Let me copy and paste the code, or just drag and drop it. This is for the green background, so I'll take this, put it into the green background click event. Then I can get rid of this procedure. So let me hit delete a couple times. There we go. And then, of course, we have the blue background click, so let me just copy and paste here. So if the message, if this is clicked, then the background color for this message box, or for this LBL message, I should say, that's supposed to be blue. So blue, there we go. And then the text should say blue. For this guy, for green, that's already selected, and it's supposed to say green background. Okay, so that takes care of the code for these 6 radio buttons. And then, of course, we have an alignment tab that we need to consider. And that's pretty easy. So first of all, let me double-click on this radio button, the left alignment button, or the left alignment radio button, I should say. And again, I'm not interested in the check change property. It's got, or the event, I should say. It's going to be the click event. Okay. So for the RDB left click event, what do we want to do? Well, for the LBL message, specifically for the text align property, this guy right here, I want to set that equal to something, or I want to assign it to something. Well, in this case, if I click left, then I want this thing to be left aligned. And if you'll remember, we did say it was going to be left, but it's going to be middle left. So middle left, we'll select that. Let me just remind you, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, for this particular label, you'll recall that for the text alignment, we have all these different options. We want to focus on these 3, on middle left, middle center, middle right. That's why you can see that the text is in the middle vertically and to the left horizontally with this particular selection. Okay. All right, so I'll double click on the center radio button, and I want the click event, so let me change that to click. Get rid of this procedure. And it's the same thing with the exception that instead of middle left, it's supposed to say middle center. So I can just type it, LBL message.textAlign is going to be assigned middle center, this guy right here. And then finally we have our last alignment radio button, which is going to be the right align. Let's change that to the click event. Get rid of this. All right, and for the right click radio button, that means LBL message.textAlign is going to be assigned middle right. And there we go. All right, let's run the program to see what we've got. So if I select green background, that's good. Red background, that's good. Let me select a green font. That's good. Let's select a blue background and a red font. Looks okay. How about blue and blue? Uh-oh, error. Blue background and foreground means you can't see the text. That's good. That's what it's supposed to do. So let me make sure that green and green does the same thing. Yep. And let's make sure that red and red does the same thing. Sure does. All right, so it looks like the font color and the background color radio buttons work. Let's try the alignment. So we have left align, we have center align, and we have right align. So everything seems to be working properly. Now we need to work on the checkboxes to make sure that those work properly. So let's close this, and let's start to work on the checkboxes. Okay, now this is going to be a little bit more difficult to do, or maybe I shouldn't say difficult, but a little bit more thought is going to be involved in working with the different checkboxes. Here's why. Well, you'll notice that I have 3 checkboxes, bold, italic, and underline. Now, how many different possibilities do we have? Well, we could have the font over here just be bold. or actually, let me start off with nothing, right? So we have this situation right here where none of them are selected. That's one possibility. A second possibility would be to select this one. A third possibility would be to select this one. A fourth possibility would be to select both of these, right, to check both of them. And then a fifth possibility would be to select just italics. A sixth possibility would be italics and bold, if they were both checked. And then we would have a seventh possibility of just bold and underline. And then the eighth possibility is where all of these are selected. So with 3 radio buttons, we have 8 different possibilities, and that makes sense because 2 to the third power is 8. If we had only 2 of these checkboxes, that would be 4 possibilities. If we only had 1 checkbox, it'd be 1 possibility, right? So 1, 4, 8, 16. I think you're starting to see the pattern here. 2 to the third power means 8 different possibilities. So we have to consider all of those 8 possibilities. We have to determine when a checkbox is actually clicked, find out what other checkboxes are clicked as well to determine what the text format is going to be. Okay, so we'll start off with the bold checkbox first. So let me double click it. Again, it takes me to the check bold checked changed event. I don't want that. I want the click event. So let me change that to click. And I'm going to get rid of this procedure. Okay, so here we go. All right, we basically have to type a bunch of if statements. Well, the first if statement I'm going to type is this: if check bold. Well, actually, let me do this. Before I do this, let's just do a bunch of comments first. So the first thing will be if we have all of them checked, right? So we'll say here underline, bold, and italics. Okay, let's assume that this first case assumes that all of them are going to be checked. And then the next case we're going to consider is just underline and bold. And then the next case we'll consider underline and italics. After that, we'll check for bold and italics, then bold, then italics, then underline, oops, and then the last case will be nothing, right? None of them are selected. So I should have a total of 8 possibilities. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, total of 8 possibilities. The first one being that all of them, we're going to check to see if all of the checkboxes have been selected, right? So this one has been checked, this one, they've all been checked. Then the next one is to check if underline and bold, underline italic, bold italic, and then we have just bold, just italic, just underline. Okay, so let's take care of these different cases. So for this one, we'll say if the CHK underline is checked. So notice what clue comes up here. For the checked property, it's going to determine if whether or not this thing has been in fact checked. Is it in the checked state? Is there a check mark in here? Okay, if that is true, okay, so I ask the question if this is equal to true. Is this true? And so I type the Boolean expression and, because just like the English conjunction and, I'm trying to determine if this is true and if this is true. It would be a different thing if I were to ask the question in the form of an or, right? Is this true or is this true? We're talking about the and logical operator right now. So both of these things have to be true. Well, what am I looking for next? Well, let's look for CHK bold. Is this checked? But we can't stop here because, as you see, we're trying to find out if underline, bold, and italic, if all 3 of those are selected. So I have to continue with one more and statement, and then we'll say CHK italics dot checked. if that is equal to true. Then, oh, by the way, I made a mistake here. If this is equal to true. There we go. And so let me go over here to the then, press enter. Let me describe to you what's happening. First, let me scroll over here so you can see what's going on. Here's the question that I'm asking. I want to determine if all three of these have been checked. If they have, then this label right here has to be bolded, underlined, and italicized. All three of them need to happen. Okay. All right, so here's how I'm going to do that. If the checkbox underline has been checked, if that's true, and if the bold checkbox has been underlined or has been selected, and if the italics checkbox has been checked, if that's equal to true. If all three of those are in fact true, then here's what I want to happen. I'll say LBL message dot font equals. Okay, let me stop right here. Now, the font for this label needs to change. Now, if I were going to do this graphically speaking, I would do something like this. I would select this particular label, I'd go to the properties area, and then I'd go to the font, right? And then I would change what font I want. Well, in this case, Microsoft Sans Serif is already selected, right, as you can see here. So I have this font, and I would change the size, or I would change the point, or I'm sorry, the bold, or I would change italic, or I would change underline. Right? I have these different properties that I could change by selecting them here graphically. But what we have to do now is we have to do this programmatically. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to instantiate a new font object. Now I know that that sounds like a 50-cent word, and you're probably thinking, what in the world does instantiate mean? And how do I do that? Well, all I'm simply saying is we're going to create a new font object for this particular label. How do we do that? You type the word new, space, type the word font, parentheses. Now we are about to create a new font for this label. Well, we want it to be the same in terms of the old font font type, I should say. So was it Arial? Was it Times New Roman? I believe it was Sans Serif. So what we'll do is we'll just say, hey, keep the same system font that it was assigned previously. So we'll just say message font, or LBL message dot font, and then parentheses. So what I've done here is I've said this first section says, hey, what kind of font do you want? See, I could have done this. I could have said parentheses Arial. I want this thing to be Arial. I want this thing to be Times New Roman. I want this thing to be Courier New. See how that works out? I could have typed in a name of a font that I wanted to use, but I don't want it to be a different font. I want it to be the same font that it was previously, or I should say currently. And what is the name of the font? As you can see here, it's Microsoft Sans Serif. So I could type that name if I wanted to, but probably an easier way for me to do it is just to say, hey, just keep it the same font. So whatever the font is for the label, how do I do that? So LBL message dot font. Right? Whatever font it currently is, keep it the same thing. I don't want to change it. Okay, so I'll type LBL message dot font. That means keep the same font. Well, now it's asking me what do I want to do in terms of the style. Well, in terms of the style, I want bold, italic, and underline because all three of these were checked. Now here's where things get crazy. Now for the font style, you want bold, space. You have to type or, and then you also want a font style of italic, space, type or, and you also want a style that is underline. And then close the parentheses, press enter. Now I know that that looks weird here. In this case, I think you understand that for the label, we want to create a new font, so we type in the word new and then font. This means you're creating a new font object and you're going to put it into this particular label. Well, what should the font be? Should it be Arial? Should it be Times New Roman, Courier New? No, let's just keep it the same font as it is previously. That's what this part means. All right, now what this part means is, well, what is the font style? Well, I want this thing to be bold, italic, and underline. Now, in between, you had to use this other Boolean expression called or. Now, what the OR basically does is it's basically saying that this is going to be true, this is going to be true, this is going to be true. So at this point, just simply mimic what it is that I'm showing you on the screen. Later on, when we talk about logical operators, this will make more sense. But to have all of these be activated, you'll have to use the OR keyword to basically test if all of these have in fact been checked. You're going to use the AND Boolean expression. All right, so at this point, we're ready for our next line. So that's going to be this one over here. Move this comment over here. So now we're going to check to see if the underline and bold have been checked. So I'll type else if space. So chk underline dot checked. If that is equal to true, and if chk bold dot checked is equal to true, then press enter. Okay, so let me do this here. Actually, this thing is not. I can put it right here. That's not a good idea either. Let me under. Let's just do this. I'll put it under here. There we go. And I'll take this comment and I'll put it here. Press enter. There we go. Okay. So what we're doing in this next if statement is we're asking the question: if the checkbox underline and if the checkbox bold are checked. So in other words, if this one is checked and if this one is checked, then the font style or the font format had better be bold and underline for this label. Okay? So how do we do that? Well, it's very similar to the previous time that we did this, where it says over here LBL message dot font. It's going to be set. Is going to be assigned equal to a new font object. What will this object font type be? Well, it says, what's the font? Well, I want to use the same font as the message box as it is already. I should say the message label. So then the next question is, after the comma, what will be the style? Well, I want it to be both underline and bold. So underline, click here, type the word OR, and we'll select bold, close the parentheses. There we go. So what this else if statement does is it asks if the underline and the checkbox, if the underline and the bold checkbox are both selected, then what we're going to do is we're going to create a new font. That new font will have the underline and the bold font style both activated, and we're going to set that, or we're going to assign it to the font property of this label. Okay, now what if that's not true? So we'll say else if, and in this case I have this next comment here. We're going to do the underline and italics, right? So let's say here if check underline dot checked is equal to true, and check italics dot checked is equal to true, then, and let me move this comment in here. So move that comment inside of the procedure, or inside of this if statement. Okay, so if this is true, then we're saying LBL message dot font is equal to new font. All right, so let's use the same font that's already inside of the LBL message label, and in this case we want underline and italics. So underline or italic, parentheses, press enter. All right, what about this next situation? So bold and italics. So else if chk bold dot checked equals true, and chk italic dot checked equals true, then, okay, so in this case, what are we going to do if the checked, if bold and if italics are both checked? Well, then the label dot font we're going to assign that to a new property, to a new object, to a new font object. It's going to have the same font. That's what this means. And in this case, we want to have it so that bold and italics are both checked, or bold and italics are both activated. So bold or italic. Close parentheses, press enter. And let me move this comment here. Press enter. Alright, so next, now that we've got all three of them out of the way, and then we have the possibility of just two of them out of the way, now we're going to check for the single possibilities. What about bold or italic or underline? So else if chk bold dot checked equals to true. Then, alright, if this checkbox is selected, if that's the only one that's selected, well, in that case, then we're just going to say LBL message dot font equals new font. We want to have the same font as the message box, so we don't want it to change. So this is how I make that happen. And then in this case, if the checkbox is the bold checkbox is checked, then we'll double click bold. And that's it. Alright, another possibility that we have to consider is that maybe just the italics checkbox is checked. So else if chk italics dot checked equals true, then, and let me go ahead and move this comment in here now before I forget. Okay, if that is true, then LBL message dot font is equal to new font LBL message dot font. So again, this part just simply says you're going to use the same font as whatever the currently existing font is for this particular label, and we're looking for the italics style. So italic, close parentheses, enter. Now we have to worry about the underline possibility. So else if chk underline dot checked is equal to true, or we're checking to see if it's equal to true. If this thing is in fact checked, then let's make the font underline. So LBL message dot font equals new font. LBL message dot font will use the same font, but we want this thing to be underlined. So I double click underline. Close parentheses, press enter. And then finally, the last case that we need to consider is where none of them were selected. Well, that's going to be our last possibility, so I'll just put else here. I don't have to worry about checking to see if any of them are clicked. I don't have to worry about checking the checkboxes, examining the checkboxes to determine if any of them are clicked or selected or checked. I've already done that up here. So in this case, LBL message dot font is equal to, or is going to be assigned, a new font. Specifically, LBL message dot font will be the same font, but for the font style, we're going to say font regular. It's not bold, not italic, not strikeout, not underline, just regular format. Then press enter. And I'll take this comment, move it over here, press enter over here. Let me get rid of that space, and that should do it. All right, this is the code just for bold, right? We're checking to determine when the user clicks the bold button. We also have to find out if underline and italics are also selected, because that's going to change our label the way it appears. Well, we've just checked for bold. Now we have to create the code for italic and underline as well, and as it ends up, it's going to be the exact same code. You'll do the exact same thing over here from here. Let me select all the way to here. Let me copy that. This is the exact same code that you're going to need to check for the underline and also for the italics checkbox. So what I'm going to do is this. Let me go back over here and double click on Underline. Let me change this to the click event. Get rid of this procedure. I have some extra space here that I can get rid of. Alright, so for the underline check, for the underline click event, let me paste the same code that we typed over here, right? The same if statement. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different possibilities. And it's going to be checking the same thing as our font checkbox, and we'll do the same thing for italics. Let me double click on italic, and we'll change the event to click, which means I can get rid of this procedure. Within the CHK italics click event, I can paste that same code because I want it to do the same thing. I want it to say, hey, if I click this, check to determine if underline and bold and italics are selected, or maybe just underline and bold, or maybe just underline and italics. I have to check all the different possibilities. Okay, so now that I've done that, let's run the code and see what happens. Alright, so let me select bold. Good. Let me unselect it. That's good. It went back to regular. Let's select underline. Let's underline. Let me unselect it. Good. Italics. That looks good. And I'll unselect this. Very good. So it looks like each individual bold, underline, italics property works. Let's see what happens now if I select two of them. For example, if I select bold and underline. That looks good. Let me remove underline and select italics. That looks good. How about this? What if we had italics and underline? Yeah, that looks good. And then, of course, finally we have all three, bold, underline, and italics. That looks good as well. And, of course, it should still work with the alignment property changing and also with the various colors for the background and also for the foreground. That should also change as well. Okay, looks good. So let's close this, and I think that should do it. Alright, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this has been helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.